ties in with what we are yet to be having as a conversation in studio. You were talking about inclusive education. In studio, we're going to be focusing on inclusive elections and how people with disabilities must be included. I like a statement that the dean said. It shouldn't be goodwill. Universities shouldn't be, giving out scholarships. They shouldn't be taking in students that have special abilities or disabilities out of goodwill. It should be by obligation. And the same stance is for us in the electoral cycle that we are entering. It should be by obligation that the Electoral Commission is inclusive of all people in Uganda. So Africa's multifaceted 2024 electoral docket does provide opportunities to strengthen multipartyism, transition back to constitutionalism from coups and the likes that has been the case for Africa. Just this year alone, there's been so many elections, both on the African continent and globally, and it's just picking up for us in East Africa. 2024, then 2025, 2026, Tanzania, Kenya, and ourselves, Uganda, are going to be going through elections. But it begs the question, where's the place for people with disabilities? Well, I'm privileged to be having this conversation with the Executive Director, Special Abilities Uganda, and that is Betty Cheptoek, and Ivan Otim, the Programs Officer with Youth Development Link. And they have been up in arms, ensuring that they do advocacy work towards a more inclusive election for Uganda come 2026. I will allow them their salutations, then we get into the conversations of the morning. I'll start with the ladies first, team.
Thank you. Good morning, viewers of NTV. My name is Cheptoek Betty Kali. I'm the Executive Director, Show Abilities Uganda, the national umbrella organization that advocates for the rights of youth with disabilities 18 to 30.
Okay.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you.
And good morning, listeners and viewers. Otim Ivan is my name. I work with the African Youth Development Link as a programs and M&E officer.
All right.
Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now, both of you are here on the account that the Electoral Commission this time round has had your pleas and has had your advocacy work in having a more inclusive election. And so they've been conducting a mapping exercise called the Identification and Mapping of Persons with Disabilities on Voters Register, the National Voters Register. Let's talk about how this mapping exercise got into existence, starting with you, Betty.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I think I can begin from the mapping exercise where it could have come from. That first of all, we have had engagements with the Electoral Commission for about 2 years as a youth with disability organization, as well as the African Development Link, and even the advocacy has also been done by organizations of persons with disabilities in regards to elections, and we wanted to see an inclusive electoral process for everybody, where everybody participates equally without any limitations. And for the side of persons with disabilities are not a homogeneous group. We have different disability categories who have peculiar needs that needs to be addressed differently. And so in our advocacy, we always wanted to see that Electoral Commission and the government of Uganda, as mandated by the Constitution and the Electoral Commission Act, to ensure that everybody participates in the spirit of fairness and freedom, so that we see that when it comes to meaningful decision making, everybody is part and parcel of the decisions that pertains to their lives.
Yes.
And so over the years, persons with disabilities have been kind of sidelined to some extent because their needs were not put into consideration. For example, a deaf person may need to be elected or even be given being given the freedom to elect their own leaders. But where the challenge comes in is when the materials or the information is not given in accessible formats with a sign language interpreter. For the hard of hearing, they have challenges with the accessing information, so they need to read from the screen. Mm-hmm. So when the leaders are conducting campaigns or launching their manifesto, the message is not going to these people who have hard of hearing challenges and even the deaf. Those with the physical disabilities have challenges accessing the polling station. Sometimes it's on a high hill area, and a person on a wheelchair like myself, I cannot go to vote because of the terrain of the land. So because of some of those challenges, we had to present our issues to Electoral Commission. And I'm happy, as I conclude on this, I am happy that when we engage with the Electoral Commission, one time the meeting at the Electoral Commission had been put in an inaccessible place. But when they realized that I was there as a person with disability, then they had to organize another day and created for us space in a room that was accessible for everybody. So for me, I think this has not just happened today. It is as a result of some of those other engagements we have had with them from time to time.
All right, that being successful, Otim, it begs the question, the identification and mapping of persons with disabilities for the National Voters Register. What important role is it yet to play around the electoral cycle towards 2026, especially focusing on young people, youths?
So, importantly, this exercise broadly one was intended to identify and do mapping of people with disabilities. But sometimes when we talk about disabilities, we may be isolated to think of those disabilities that we know about or those that we see more often. But disability, according to the Ugandan framework, we have about 8 categories recognized. But within the disability fraternity, there are more than 8. So how much is this information going to be available to the people who have done the mapping? And then it should be inform the usability of that information. But the question that you asked is that, one, in our own sense is that we believe that this information, one, should now be used in various formats. First of all, a post exercise should be undertaken to assess how the exercise has moved, because there could be challenges while the exercise is being undertaken.
Speaking of the exercise, what was it aiming at in particular?
Yeah, so the exercise was aiming at identifying and mapping out people with disabilities at the village level and their disability needs, so that then that would inform how the Electoral Commission can plan and administer an election from a disability inclusive perspective. Meaning that if you are identifying how many people at the community need braille material, then probably the assumption is that they are planning to see within, if it's paper ballots that we've been using, how many braille material should they put for that particular polling station. So, but again, also broadly within the communication, disability needs various modes of communication. We're talking about sign language as a language. Now, how many of that information has not been made available on how to vote, where to vote? So we need to have sign language interpreters at what moment, at national level, at local level, so that we can be able to enable people with disabilities access the information like anyone else.
Okay, all right. Betty, when we look at measures that can be taken to actually help people with disabilities work around the voting rights, especially in terms of the education that you talked about, how have you been able to ensure that you extend as much information about their voting rights and the importance of them participating in this registration process that the Electoral Commission is in?
As an organization, we have been able to, first of all, build the capacity of young people with disabilities in this country to realize the importance of participating meaningfully in decision-making processes. And then we have also contacted the leadership. More so during the time of this exercise, we have tried to call the people that we could reach out, because we are looking at the time being very short. For, I mean, 10 days in the whole country is not an easy time, but it was for me a big opportunity, because this has never happened, and we really needed to see that compared to the previous years, there are more numbers realized in the 2026 forthcoming elections of persons with disabilities participating And so we used the structures within our communities. We have the leadership from LOC1, LOC2. Those structures are very instrumental in reaching out to the real persons within their community. And we're like, there is this exercise, and this is an opportunity that we don't need to lose. So let's really work so hard, use our persons with disabilities within the leadership in this country to reach out to the lowest person and ensure that the different disability categories are brought on board to register during this exercise. And then we have also engaged with different partners within the mainstream sector of the youth to be more mindful about ensuring that there are deliberate efforts that enable meaningful participation of young people with disabilities in elections, as well as persons with disabilities. And I remember last year or the year before, we had a big program of over 8 partners, where in every region there was mapping exercise done by these people who are from the mainstream or the persons without disabilities, in ensuring that they really reach out to these people, because many times, because of these challenges I talked about, the persons with disabilities interest is very low.
So you already have data that can be compared to with the results that will come out of this mapping exercise?
We may not have the exact data, but we just have some bits of information from the stakeholders that we have been engaging, from the observation reports. I think we even did some work with AYDL last year and other organizations, and we sent out persons with disabilities so that they can easily identify who really has a disability. If you are a person with albinism, are you really having the specific disability that is mentioned? And many things that came up was these persons with disabilities even did not know that they are supposed to be on their own list of persons with disabilities, or they did not even know that they have a disability and they should be. So
that actually opens up a can of worms, because then that shows you that the already existing systems, as far as information is concerned, are already having gaps in as far as knowing that I'm a councillor, or I'm a local leader, and as a local leader in my decision making, I should be inclusive of people with disabilities. Speaking of collaborations and partnerships, Otim, in this regard, as youth activists, how have you been able to collaborate with local councils on parish levels to be able to encourage as many people with youths with special abilities or disabilities to turn up to ensure accuracy and inclusivity in this voter registration program?
I think our role was at this stage has been upstream. That one, the Electoral Commission is the key actor in this, and broadly looking at that, is that it needs various actors to support it. And for us, from the civil society perspective, one of our roles has been trying to send out as much information as possible to our network and spaces, but also amplify spaces like this one on NTV to see how, one, we can get as much people as possible to participate, but also use social media. So one, also in other formats, we have used community radios, where we definitely work to see how we can use people to kind of mobilize people persons with disabilities to participate. But broadly within the outlook is that whereas we have used different formats, the challenges with disabilities are various and enormous. Right now, you do a lookout and see, for example, which government website has accessible formats. Now, like if we're going to allow people with disabilities to access information on web pages for government or the Electoral Commission, how many does that website have an audio visual on it? It probably does not have a software, audio visual software with it. Does it have a magnifier software with it? So still you will see that even when we broadly sensitize and engage in various ways, there's information that you can still need to create and see how people can sustainably access that information. And there has to be still reasonable accommodation on how people with disabilities can access information. All
right, as we put this conversation to an end, Betty, I'm going to give you the closing remarks. These mapping exercises done and dusted. What next? Stakeholders, what next through the Electoral Commission, and how are we ensuring that we're having a more inclusive 2026 general election as Uganda?
Thank you very much. For me, as my last parting short, I just want to really, first of all, thank the government of Uganda for being very intentional this time round, and I want to encourage the stakeholders outside there that let us be very inclusive. Inclusion does not only mean women, I mean persons with disabilities alone. Inclusion is very broad. We are looking at the women, we are looking at the women, the pregnant women, because normally when they come to vote, they should be given the priority to vote first and then go. We are looking at the elderly persons who should really be part of this process, and if the Electoral Commission can put in place measures that will really encourage many women, I mean many people, marginalized people in the community to be given priority, and then I am sure everybody will be given the opportunity and the platform. The youth are there. Yes, we have different categories of the young people. I think it's very important that when the time comes, let everybody participate equally with others without any limitations. And when you see these other people who are marginalized in one way or another, let them be considered and given the first priority.
All right.
Then to the partners out there, I really want to call upon you that let's be very sensitive when it comes to this very critical moment where we are making big decisions that regards our communities, that regards the development of our country. Let us look at leaders that are going to champion the development of our communities so that we don't regret for the next 5 years. Okay. So I really want to thank you so much for giving me the platform.
All right, Betty and Ivan, thank you so much for the advocacy work and the championing work that you're doing. This brings us to the end of Morning at NTV. Thank you so much for watching. In your space that you are in and transacting with today, make sure that it is inclusive.